Welcome back to the Huntech Pro podcast with me, Johan Smit, as your host. Big thanks for our presenting sponsor, My Trophy Room. Preserve your proudest moments with the app's seamless photo features, designed to display your hunting trophies like never before. Download My Trophy Room for Google Play or Apple App Store. Subscribe on YouTube and all our social platforms under Huntech Pro. Whether you're a seasoned hunter, an inspiring outdoor enthusiast, or someone who simply loves the thrill of adventure, you're in the right place. Join us as we bring you exciting stories from the wild, expert insights into hunting and shooting gear, and a front row seat to some of the most exhilarating hunts around the globe. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready to immerse yourself into the world of Huntech Pro, where every hunt has a story, and every story is worth sharing. Let's get started. Guys, I really have somebody interesting for our podcast today. So I can't remember how many years it was back when I was checking out YouTube and a video pops up of this kid just slaying animals left and right. And I remember I was telling my wife, geez, check out this kid. He's so young and he's such a good bow hunter. So the guy we're going to chat with today is Jackson Engel. Jackson, thanks for joining us on today's podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I've seen all those YouTube videos of you, and it was crazy to see not only the good content that you guys created, but your shot placements were all on par. At what age did you start hunting?
Yeah, I started hunting, I guess, going out on hunts at 3 years old. And ironically, it was actually in Namibia before I ended up moving there later on in life. So we went on a family trip to Namibia. My dad had gone on a couple hunts there before. And I think I was 3 years old. And he took the whole family on a hunt there. And so that was my first exposure to being like in the field hunting. I mainly stayed back at camp because at that age you're a little bit loud. But then, he started to take me out more and more after that, and eventually prepared me for my first hunt when I was 7. So I guess I had actually quite a bit of hunting experience before I ended up shooting an animal. But in my book, when you shoot your first animal, it's kind of really when you become a hunter and get inducted into the club.
Yeah, man, I must say I do the same with my son. He's 5 years old now, and it was mid last year when he was 4.5 years old. He shot his first animal. It was a porcupine, but it's just like I think like your dad did with you. He took you on all those trips to prepare you to teach you, gun safety and both, being safe with weapons in your hands. Can you remember that first hunt you did?
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, my dad did a lot of that preparation beforehand of getting used to shooting a rifle, getting used to safety, and then all of the general skills of hunting, right? Kind of trying to build, versus just walking out and shooting something, teaching about identifying tracks and animals and the techniques of stalking and that type of thing. And so on this hunt, it was a family safari in Zimbabwe. So we were there for 14 days with another family. They were close friends of ours, and it was fun because I guess there were 5 of us kids, and we were all kind of getting our first hunting experiences. And to be 5 kids running around in the bush in Zimbabwe is pretty awesome. And my dad made me wait. He was doing a leopard hunt, and so he was, hunting bait animals. They're trying, leopard hunting is pretty intensive. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So he made me wait till pretty far into the hunt, and I was just sitting there itching and waiting. Ended up going on a couple stalks on warthogs. And that was what my dad told me, is he said, we're going to get you your first animal in this hunt. It's going to be a warthog. So I distinctly remember the first stalk that we did, and we stalked into this warthog, and it must have been like 15 yards in front of us. But I was so short that I couldn't see over the grass and actually have a shot on him. But I remember I was just sitting there shaking. It was the closest I'd been to an animal before, and I was hooked from that moment on. So couple days later, we had a few failed stalks, so we ended up sitting over a water hole. My dad felt like that was the best situation, and our PH felt like that's the best situation as a kid to just have a controlled shot scenario. And so waited a few hours, ended up having a big old warthog boar come in, and yeah, he was rooting around in the sand, looking for bugs and things like that, and I could just see his shoulder over the edge of the ground. And my dad was a little bit nervous. He's like, "Yeah, let's maybe wait for him to get out of there." I said, "No, Dad, I've got him. I'm ready." And he trusted me. He said, "Okay, if you got the crosshairs on him, you could take him." I dropped him there, and it wasn't an actual, warthog hole. It was just a little divot. But I remember all I said when I went back to camp and told my parents or my mom and our friends about it. I said, "I shot him in his hole. I shot him in his hole," and it was just the coolest experience for me. And dropped him right in his tracks, and we have video footage of me turning to my dad and saying, I was like, "Man, Dad, I couldn't do it without you. You're a good PH." And it is true. That's what I remember the most about that is that it was like one of the best days I've shared with my dad in life, and getting to just be there in the bush together, sharing that moment, just the two of us. And he was tearing up with pride, and then the moment of him actually, putting the blood on my face, it's that nothing's ever going to top that hunt for sure.
Yeah, I mean that must have been super special for your dad as well. I know the feeling that I had with my son as well. It's a feeling that you can't describe to anybody. It's like all the time that he put in and learning you how to hold the rifle properly and where to aim and all that kind of stuff has paid off for that moment. But it's like your chest wants to explode out. That's how proud he must have been, because that's how I felt with my son as well. And no, I think like you just told the story, man. You can hear the emotions in it as well. It's just awesome to know that your dad spent all that time to prepare you for that moment.
Yeah, I was fortunate to have him teach me and like I said, walk me through the process of kind of teaching me like the ethos of hunting before action and preparing me for that moment versus just randomly throwing me out there and the first time I'm in the bush, handing me a rifle and pulling the trigger. There was a lot more that went into it and making me wait a little bit too, and kind of experience some disappointment and some patience and waiting. And yeah, it's I'm thankful for that. And he's just continued to teach me throughout my life since that day too.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome to hear. I mean, if let's say you were driving around in a vehicle and you just shot your first animal, I don't think you would have had that same feeling that you described now, because it's very important to understand the ethical part about hunting as well, and to spend time and to spend time with it and putting the right time in it to get your perfect shot. That I would suggest that to any dad taking out his kid on his first hunt,
For sure. Otherwise, you're setting them up for disappointment too, because it's a lot more fun having your first hunting memory being dropping that animal in its tracks than missing it or making a bad shot and wounding it, and that being your introduction into hunting too. So,
yeah, man. So after that, I know the video obviously that I saw of you were bow hunting. So at what age did you start shooting with your bow?
yeah, I got my first bow at 10, and it was kind of an interesting situation because I was just talking about my dad teaching me things about hunting, but bow hunting was something that I started on my own. I was watching DVDs, back in the day, that's what we did, watch hunting DVDs, and on repeat was watching those. And we had moved back to the States for a couple of years, and so I had Outdoor Channel. I was watching all those as a little kid, and I said, "Man, Dad, I really want to get a bow." And so he bought me at Walmart in Texas just a little. It actually was a compound bow, like little cams on it or whatever, and just I'd take it in the yard and shoot and play around. And then just before we moved to Namibia, he bought me a real bow. A kid's still a beginner's bow, but
Yeah.
he knew nothing about bow hunting. He was just supporting me. He saw that fire I had in me for wanting to bow hunt, and he wanted to support me in that. So he got me a bow. Neither of us knew anything. The local bow shop got me set up a little bit, and then we moved to Namibia and I would just shoot in the yard, practice, and it was something that we learned together, but it was a weird thing that it was something that was mine and not my dad's. And so he's learning with me, but he's not shooting a bow. He doesn't know all of the technique, right?
Yeah.
And I think we both learned a lot when we ended up going out into the bush and bow hunting for the first couple times, learning together things about it's sitting in the blind that close and what those things are, shot angles and shot placement. I think neither of us really knew the limitations of bows back then, and it was kind of something that we had to get used to. It's not, if animals quartering towards at the water, you don't just shoot it there in the front of the shoulder with a bow. You're going to hit it right, especially as a kid with 40 pounds. You're going to
Yeah.
hit the bone and you're not going to penetrate. And that came with a few heartaches because there's some things that we just didn't know. And honestly, there were back in the day, this was 16 years ago. So there were fewer resources. You didn't have the same resources on like YouTube where you could just YouTube things about shot placement with a bow and arrow setups and broadheads and things like that. You just kind of relied on your local bow shop. But as you know, every bow shop, like there's people that have opinions, right? And so you kind of go based on their opinion and you kind of eventually over time evolve and learn stuff. And so eventually my dad ended up getting a bow himself, but it was kind of funny then, like flipping roles where he had learned bow hunting with me, but then I was teaching him how to shoot a bow,
Yeah.
and I still like he turns to me for advice on bow setups and on form and shooting style and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's a fun evolution. Once I started bow hunting, I was hooked. I I shot maybe one or two animals with a rifle after, and otherwise I think I went 10 years. I went a 10-year stretch without rifle hunting, just only bow hunting. And any opportunity I had to hunt, I wanted to do it with a bow instead of a rifle. And now I'm learning I'm starting to introduce rifle hunting again, and it's been fun, but nothing compares to that obsession with the bow.
I started, my first hunt was a bow hunt. So, the first time I picked up a bow and I could hit the target, that was amazing for me. And when I went on my first hunt, I was 19 years old. Um, I, my friend said, okay, let's go take your first animal. And I remember that feeling when I hit I shot a diker was my first animal I shot with a bow. And I remember the feeling I had, the rush you get with your bow is totally different than shooting it with a rifle. And once that bug has bit you, man, it's over. I know, I know the bow bug it's bad. If you want to shoot everything with a bow from then on.
Exactly. It's that feeling, like you said, it's so different, but then there's also everything else that goes into like the obsession of your equipment and practicing and all of that kind of stuff. There's so much more that goes into it that you get obsessed with it.
Especially with the shot placements, like you mentioned, the bone structures that you have to shoot past, especially when you were that young, not shooting heavy poundage. I know you spend a lot of time probably with the shot placement studies as well. And like you mentioned, not taking shots when it's quartering on or stuff like that. But, it's actually awesome to hear that you and your dad actually evolved with each other on that, because while you were learning, he was learning as well. And then the bug eventually bit him as well. So it's so awesome to know that you guys both share that passion,
Yeah, for sure. It was a fun thing to then be able to be sitting in a hide together. My bow hanging on one side, his bow hanging on another side, and he waited several years. I think as soon as I started bow hunting, he got the interest in it, and the bug kind of bit him of just kind of watching me. But he sort of supported me for a few years and wanted me to get some hunts under my belt before he started bow hunting. So
then you mentioned that you guys moved to Namibia. How was that for you?
yeah, we moved when I was 10, and to be honest, I think a lot of people ask me because I was born in Texas, grew up there, grew up in other parts of Africa for a few years, and then moved to Namibia. And I think a lot of people kind of expect me to have this story of culture shock, and it was terrible, and it was so hard moving to Africa. But for Namibia, I grew up going there on vacation. That was my idea of like the dream destination. Like I'd get so excited when we were going to go visit Namibia. And my dad went on his first hunt there, I think in 2002, and ended up becoming good friends with with the outfitters we hunted or he hunted with. Ended up making some other friends in the country. So when we eventually moved there, I guess probably 7, 8 years later, we kind of already had that established community there a little bit, and it was familiar to us, right? And for me at 10, especially thinking about hunting, right? I was moving to the motherland, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Going from, especially after spending a few years in Texas, and I tried my hand at deer hunting a little bit with a rifle, never shot one as a kid, but I was like, man, I miss Africa. So to be able to then live there and have all that stuff accessible all the time was pretty awesome.
Tell me, was it difficult for you to adapt, like from being born in the USA, then moving to Africa land, with all the different languages? Did you struggle to adapt with that, or was it easy for you to adapt, or was it something like, okay, you better learn now or you're gonna die?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, all those early exposures helped traveling around different parts of Africa, that there's familiarity with culture. And thankfully in Namibia, most people speak English, right? So at least it wasn't do or die, but for sure, it was a process of kind of assimilating into the culture. And Afrikaans culture is very much like Afrikaans people love to speak Afrikaans, and they aren't shy to switch between. But then you sit there and it's like, well, if they switch to Afrikaans, I don't understand what they're saying. And so in school, I learned it, from a foundational level of grammar and vocabulary and stuff like that. And my parents also, we had a tutor. One of my teachers actually would come to our house a couple times a week and give us some additional teaching in Afrikaans. But eventually it was just being out. I started doing competitive archery, and that's really where I found my community, but they're all Afrikaans. And so they mainly wanted to speak English in self-defense. So they said, man, if you can, let's try and speak Afrikaans, because we prefer that. And we'd rather be the ones that are comfortable. Like, you're the odd man out. You're the only guy that wants to speak English. So that's how I learned. But then, you learn through trial and error and all that kind of stuff. But I think, again, Afrikaans people also really appreciate when you do just try to speak the language. And so I think that's how I learned pretty well, is that it's a welcoming culture. And I think, as far as adjusting to life there, I always say to people, if there's anywhere outside of the US that's similar to the South in the US, like similar to Texas culture, let's say, like my home culture, it's Namibia and South Africa. I feel like Afrikaans culture, there's a lot of similar values and lifestyles that reflect kind of what I was familiar with. So it wasn't like moving to Japan, right?
Yeah.
Where everything's just different. We hunt, we like to braai, we value family and community. So and now it's, after growing up there, I'm split. I always joke that I'm African American. Some people don't like that joke. It doesn't always go over well these days. But I say African American, not American African, because even though I was born in America, I think more of me still identifies with that African culture, because as a kid, those are your foundational years.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved growing up there, and it just became my culture, and that's my home. Even now, after I've been back in the States for about 7 years, this is becoming home again. But Namibia is always going to be like home in my heart.
I must say, man, I was shocked to hear that not one of your parents are Afrikaans, so you learned it quite well. So it's great for you, actually, that the way you learned it. I mean, it's like it's not like it was like, yeah, I have to learn it, or I'm not going to fit into this, but the way that it was like within the archery, the stuff that you were interested in, and that's how you learn the language. I always get upset sometimes with the Afrikaans language, because that's the way my brain is wired. And working a lot with international people, sometimes I still make mistakes, doing the direct translations and stuff like that. but it's also a language that's very own to I must say Africa, you know. So Namibia and South Africa, it's very, I think it's a proud language for the folk back here, and if you learn it, it also becomes part of your culture as well.
For sure. That's you hit the nail on the head. And I like that. Just again, that's a similarity. Texas is one of the proudest places in the world, you know, but they have, I'd say Namibia and South Africa give them a run for their money as far as like pride and in their culture and where they're from, you know, and I love that. And I feel that way now too um, about Namibia, South Africa culture, Afrikaans culture. I'm proud of that too. And I like listening to Afrikaans music still or whatever it may be. And yeah, that's never gonna leave me.
It's actually when I was back in Texas this year as well, I could almost feel like it's part of where I'm from, you know. So it's the familiar or similarities between the two countries. You're spot on with that. But I I quickly want to find out, because you've hunted in Africa and you've hunted back in America. What would you say is similar in hunting, and what is the big differences that you've experienced?
I have a harder time thinking of similarities than I do of differences. You know, I'd say hunting is always, it's still hunting, and um, there's still similar things of the culture of hunting. But as far as like my year after year, my hunting lifestyle here is completely different. Um, I'd say one of the things is accessibility. So here we have the whole public land situation, which is super cool because, and it still baffles me. I've now been hunting public land for 4 seasons, 4 deer seasons, up here in Tennessee where I live now, and it it still blows my mind some days when I get to just drive out there. I get to park my truck and just go walk into the woods and I can hunt, you know, just some random piece of land I've never been to, you know. It's awesome. That's something that you don't get to experience in Africa at all. But I would
Yeah.
say on the other side, there's a little bit more access to private land in Africa because that's pretty much all it is. Besides, you know, government concessions where those are mainly done for you know international hunts and professional operations. But you grow up knowing people. You have friends and family who have farms. You get to go hunt on their farms, and there's a little bit more accessibility to that. Whereas here, I think I think if you grow up knowing the right people, I think some people do have that, but it's more limited, right? And that's one of the weirdest things for me is the tags and the regulations and the seasons and all that. It's stressful too. I get
Yeah.
stressed all the time that I'm breaking the law and not knowing it. You know, I'm always reviewing, and I even like the day I wake up, usually on opening day, I feel like I always still end up Googling and just like pulling up and double checking the season dates and making sure I can still hunt. Um, so that's what's kind of weird, right? And we have this
Yeah.
short burst. It's 3 months, and then you're finished. And so deer season actually ended here last weekend, and this is the first Saturday I've woken up in 3 months that I haven't, you know, gone hunting. And
Oh.
it's weird. It's like you kind of go from 0 to 60, and then vice versa, it just ends. And then suddenly you kind of feel lost. And um, on the other hand, though, it's kind of a marathon, even though it's that short period. It's kind of a marathon because I'd say that's one of the other big differences. I don't go on hunting trips as much anymore with deer hunting. I hunt from my house, right? I'll
Yeah.
drive 45 minutes, an hour to the spots that I hunt, go in the woods, I hunt for a morning, and then I pack up and I head home, you know, and that's my hunt, or maybe an evening or whatever. And I'll hunt once or twice a week, wherever time allows. And that's fun that I can go hunt whenever I want, but I miss the experience of like hunting camp, you know, where you have that anticipation of a trip and you get all your gear together and you're ready for that trip, and then you go spend multiple days hunting, right? And you're in camp with friends and that type of thing, and you're kind of immersed in it. Whereas this is a weird thing where I'm in a tree looking at my watch, like, man, I need to make it home for dinner. Or in the morning, I'm like, well, we've got this thing we're meeting up with friends. I've got to be home for. So I'd say that's one of the other big differences too. That's weird about the accessibility of deer hunting and how mixed in it is with urban life.
I must say it was for me very strange to experience the like you say with the tag systems that your dates are running out and you get stressed about everything, and then you really hope that you get your animals you're after, in that specific time. Where here in South Africa, if your farm has P3 exemption, I can hunt right throughout the year. All that's more challenging than the other thing is obviously the weather challenges that we have. Like hunting this time of the year, you're gonna rain. You're gonna rain wet, so your hunt is gonna be busted. But yeah, that's the one thing that I mean I can drive to any farm. I know I can walk in, I can hunt, I can get the animals I'm after. Certain animals obviously require the permits we have to get for them, but yeah, no, it's definitely different from hunting back here in Africa and then hunting back there. But that's why I love hunting in different countries, because you want to learn the different cultures and all that kind of stuff. That's really important to me as well.
Yeah, for sure. And you kind of named it too about that you can go in anywhere and hunt the animal you're after. Where I think that's my other thing that I just have to adjust here is like, here's a good day if I see an animal, right? I consider it a success. I've seen deer. I'm in the zone, but there's a much lower density of animals, and you just don't have the diversity, right? I'm hunting one species versus in in Africa, you've got all of these different species. So on any given day, even if it's
Yeah,
not what you're after, you're probably going to see something.
yeah,
And there's a little bit more. And I'd say when you have a failed, let's say you have a failed stock on something or something busts you at a water hole, there's a little bit more hope of something else coming in, and or you can keep walking and bump into something else. And it's the same with deer, but it's much, I feel higher stakes. It's that pressure of like when that moment happens. I
yeah,
mean, I've hunted 4 seasons here in Tennessee, and I've only seen a couple of shootable bucks out hunting. So it's like I'm hunting this figment of my imagination almost, that you see the sign and whatever. And part of that's because I'm not a great deer hunter, right? So even after quite a few years being back here, I'm learning. It's so different, but it makes me crazy too. And usually this time of year, as soon as the season ends, I'll be obsessed with deer hunting all season, and then the season ends, and my mind switches to Africa. I'm kind of done. I'm kind of done with the deer, and I'm like, man, because now it's approaching hunting season in Africa, and so yeah, this time of year is usually when I start dreaming about that.
So Jackson, do you have anything planned for this year? Do you want to go back to Africa, or do you have stuff planned back home?
Unfortunately, 2024 was my big year. I had a lot of fun stuff in 2024. Spent a lot of my travel budget. So, yeah, I had trips that were hunting related, non-related, or non-hunting related. So, 2025, there's a chance that maybe I'll spontaneously decide to maybe go to Namibia or to Mozambique, probably to join somebody on a hunt. In Mozambique, my family has an area that we outfit there, so there's always a chance that I'll make a plan to go there. Which our hunting season is August through November, so that would be later in the year. Otherwise, just deer hunting back here in Tennessee. Still trying to get a proper Tennessee buck. Last year, I shot actually this one right behind me. I shot a pretty dinky buck. I was proud of him for public land, and it was my last day to hunt that season. So I don't regret it, but I definitely am trying to get that big buck. So hopefully things come right for me next year, and then I definitely want to start this spring applying for some of the out of state licenses and things like that here in the States. I haven't really taken advantage of that. And I think maybe because it overwhelms me a little bit with all of the technical stuff of building up preference points and applying for tags by certain deadlines and that type of thing. And then you have to kind of pay in advance. You're paying for those applications and things. Um, but I'm never going to go on those hunts if I don't start applying now. So, uh, yeah.
When I ever come over to that side, I don't care how big my buck is that I get to harvest. The time that I've got available to harvest this is most important to me. So 2 years
Mhm.
ago, I think I shot a 110 class buck, but it was only on day 14 that I was able to harvest that buck. So although
Wow.
it wasn't big, it was on public land. So at the end of the day, that buck was special to me, although it wasn't big. So that buck
Yeah.
there behind you, still, it's a proper buck, especially if taken with bow. I mean, it's all the time you've put into it that counts at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And I always have to, I sometimes get down on myself at the end of deer season. Like, man, I suck at deer hunting and it's like another year without a buck. But um, I've also just got to work with the time that I have. It honestly, and what I might start adjusting next year is that earlier I was talking about the hunting style and like going for a morning here and evening there, whatever, spread out over 3 months. And what I maybe need to start doing is budgeting my time for a couple of larger chunks throughout the season versus hunting so consistently, waiting for, a weekend that's really good conditions and maybe taking a day off before and after or whatever and just hunting hard, you know, um, and going, when the conditions are right, going and finding fresh sign and hunting it. Because what's hard for me now is I may go in and find fresh sign and hunt or have really good action, but I may not be able to go back the next day. And then the next week, that window is probably closed,
Yeah.
especially in the rut, how quickly things change and whatever. This year I had a really close call on an awesome buck, just big, huge body, nice, mature buck. And it was my first time climbing up in this tree. I didn't have a lot of shooting lanes, and he walked by 25 yards, didn't have a shot, and he caught a bit of my scent. So I didn't really expect to see him in that same spot because he smelled me. But either way, I mean, that was my window. I never saw him again the rest of the season hunting that spot. And yeah, even I had a trail camera just a little ways back in that spot. And this was actually some private land that I have access to hunt. And at the end of the year, I pulled that trail camera and looked at the pictures, and you can see a buck there, like the day after I hunted, or a day before I hunted. And it's just you have to be in the right place at the right time. So I think my hunting style right now, I do what I can, and that's why I shoot does. I enjoy shooting does and getting some venison. I get to donate some of those, but also have to balance work and time with my wife and stuff. But that's a long answer to your question, but hopefully maybe end of this year, but for sure 2026, I'll be back in Africa, probably Mozambique, Namibia, and hopefully I can start taking off some other destinations too.
Now take me through your 2024 season. I mean, I saw some posts on social media. You guys had some amazing crocodiles that you guys hunted. What other big hunts did you guys do last year?
Yeah, so I went for 2 weeks in August. I actually went and hunted for myself. We had a cancellation that opened up some quota, and so ended up going with a family friend and tagging along on his hunt. And yeah, we both shot big crocodile. We both shot buffalo. Both shot some plains game. I shot my first bush pig, which was awesome.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, it was my first time ever getting to experience the proper safari in like a wild, big hunting area like that, dangerous game hunting for myself. I've always gotten to do it here or there, tagging along on family safaris as a kid, or then growing up in Namibia in high school and in university, when I'd go back on holiday, I would apprentice with a professional hunter there and tag along on some buffalo hunts and croc and whatever else. But doing it yourself is a different story. And so
Yeah.
this was special to just like, I wasn't a client. It's my family's hunting area. It's a little bit different. So it's kind of the best of both worlds where just get to go enjoy time. My dad was there. Our PH kind is like a big brother to me. And then his younger brother, Colby, was our cameraman, and he's a close friend of mine. So it was just a special group of people and some of the best 2 weeks of my life. I mean, unforgettable experience. And so, croc hunting on our river is super exciting because it's a tidal river. We're so close to the coast. The river actually goes up and down with the tide every day, and it's thick, jungly around the river. And I've hunted crocs before, but mainly on, I'd say, more traditional bodies of water, sandy banks and things like that. Whereas this is these steep, muddy banks, and you actually really do walk and stalk. You will float the river, you'll spot a croc out of the water up ahead, or we would just get out and walk and go to areas where we knew there were crocs. And it's just so exciting in this thick, dense jungle, basically stalking in on these crocs and trying to find the right big old one. I shot an ancient 14-foot croc,
Wow.
and it was awesome. He was missing half of his teeth. He had started to lose condition, and I mean, an animal like that is minimum 75 years old, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of a strange feeling hunting an animal. Like for me, that's 3 times my age, right? At least it's it's sobering. It makes you think, right? And you can't take that for granted because that's a life that's been there for 3/4 of a century at least. So it was fun I felt that with other croc hunts I've been on, but doing it myself and being the one to pull the trigger was just taking that experience to the next level. And then same thing with the buffalo. I mean, that's that I'd say is in my top 3 hunts of all time. It was just incredible getting to be the one to pull the trigger on a buff.
Yeah, I mean crocodile hunting, and I've done it a few times with my wife as well. It's people always think, driving around in a Kruger National Park, or when they drive around the Delta, they see the crocs lying there and they think it's an easy hunt. It's one of the most difficult hunts I've actually been on. People don't know, like, they can sense vibrations, or they look at all the animals around them. And so to be able to harvest an old croc like that, it must be special, man, and especially for that size. You can be very proud of it.
Yeah, it was the shot placement too is what's so unique. I
Yeah.
really don't think I've ever been that nervous on a shot. I came this close to, because it's a weird thing where normally hunt, there's a shot happens super fast, but with Croc, it's like you sit there and you kind of get set up and you figure out your shot placement and you kind of take your time. And so my dad had another rifle ready for backup because the last thing you want is for it to go in the water, right? Because then
Yeah.
it's gone.
Yeah.
Especially when in our river in Mozambique with the mud, you have to be really careful about them just sliding on the mud and falling in. So he was ready for a backup shot, and it's kind of a thing where you get the team ready and you say, "Okay, guys, ready. I'm taking the safety off. I'm going to take the shot." And everyone gets ready and it gets real quiet. And my heart rate just skyrocketed. And I came this close to just having to take another breath and be like, hold on, guys, pause. I mean, you start thinking about, like, what happens if you miss that spot. I mean, you're aiming at a tennis ball, and if you miss that, it's over. And you have to just remind yourself that you have all the time in the world, and all you have to do is squeeze. And it's cool because we have one of the bog death grips for the
Yeah.
rifle, so it holds. You've got a really steady platform to shoot off of, but it also minimizes the recoil. So
Yeah.
actually, you just get to see through the scope. You just squeeze, execute the shot, and actually get to see that croc anchored there through the scope. It's the best feeling ever.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know
so
if I've
cool.
ever felt relief like that.
Yeah, well, I think with our listeners, if people don't know, the way you hunt crocodile, you want to spine them. So you've got a small target in the neck that you actually want to hit them. So if they're lying broadside, you want to go like 2 or 3 inches in line with a smile. You'd like to come back, and that's where you need to break the spine, and then obviously to anchor your crocodile right there, like Jackson just said. So yeah, that's a tricky shot, man. Especially if your angle is a little bit quartering away, it can be very tricky.
Especially when you've heard horror stories or even witnessed somebody else having a croc splash in the water. It's that's a bad day. So
Yeah.
thankfully this one turned out.
I hunted my second croc. I hunted actually. That happened. We spot him like it was like at 6 p.m. at night, so it was like last light. And he was very sneaky. Didn't come out of the water, and we found him at 6 p.m. So we quickly put in a stalk, and we got within I think 50 yards of him, but he was facing away from us. So I literally had like a small window to shoot at, and my first shot was just right next to the spine, and he darted off in the water, and I put another 2 shots in him where I could find holes, or a place to put a shot in. And that next night or that night I prayed a lot, just asked God, please let that crocodile surface so we can find him. And the next morning, me and my friend, we went back there, and we found him. We went to climb out of the dam the next day, and he was lying there. So I was so thankful we were able to get him.
That's awesome. Yeah, it doesn't happen often that way, that you get to find them. So.
And then my wife is like lucky. She shot hers at 18 yards with a crossbow, and he's, first shot nailed him, and he was done.
That's super cool.
Yeah, but Jackson, that it's so awesome to hear your stories also from, hunting these crocodiles, so that people can understand it's not easy hunting these big crocs. My father-in-law always has a saying that they don't get that big for nothing. They're not stupid. So
yeah, exactly.
So Jackson, I prepared something for you. This wasn't in the list I sent through to you. You've got 10 seconds to answer me the following. Okay. Let's start. What is your favorite animal to hunt?
I'm going to say oryx and warthog. I've got to do it and. Those are my 2 favorite.
Your dream hunting destination?
I've got 2 answers. Africa would be Cameroon for Lord Darby Eland. And then North America would be Alaska for brown bear.
What's your most valuable piece of hunting gear?
Like sentimental value or my most like utilitarian value? Yeah,
like something you can't live without.
I guess it's going to be corny, but my bow. I've always just been pretty sentimental about my bows, and that's you can't hunt without it, obviously. But I get attached to my bow, and I'd say that's my number one baby.
This one is also almost similar to the previous question. What is your go-to item that you never leave home without?
Probably my Leatherman, actually. So like my multi-tool knife, I use that probably more than anything.
Well, if you get stuck with something, at least you've got your Leatherman to help you out of the situation. So, what is the most disgusting thing you've ever eaten?
Ooh, definitely raw testicles. Yeah, impala. That was last year. I was in Namibia. I shot an impala, and our friend forced me to eat the raw nuts.
Yeah,
and it was summertime. It was super hot. It was like 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius, and we had driven around for a couple more hours on the bucky after I'd shot it, and so the meat and everything had gotten pretty steamy. It hadn't spoiled, but that testicle was just hot, and yeah, it was not great. That's one of the only things that's gotten me to like actually gag out loud.
Yeah.
I got it down, but funnily enough, then later this year, my buffalo, our chef in camp in Mozambique, actually cooked the testicles. It was fantastic. It was great. He called them safari oysters because here in the States we have Rocky Mountain oysters.
Yeah.
And he fried them up in some batter and some seasoning, and that was delicious. So very different than the raw thing.
So there you go, folks. If you like to have a testicle, eat it cooked, not raw.
Take my word for it.
Okay, next one. Your worst hunting experience you've had?
I mean, I could get real sad about like wounding an animal and things like that. Like those are definitely would be my worst hunting experiences. I would say, trying to think of one that was more of like, because some of your worst hunting experiences end up being the most fun stories after the fact, right? Where you get stuck or something happens and it's just terrible. Actually, so I would say a good one was in Mozambique this year. I actually just posted a video of this yesterday. Was we left our boat tied up overnight. Normally, we every day we take the boat out on the trailer and we take it back to camp. But we were planning on taking it back out in the morning, and so we just decided to leave it tied up. And those tide swings are so crazy. We actually we honestly don't know what happened exactly, but we showed up back at the boat ramp and there was no boat, but there was still a
Oh,
rope.
that sucks.
And we started tugging on the rope and like, yep, boat is still there. And then we pulled it up with the cruiser and you just see it start coming out of the water. Whole thing with the outboard motor. Poor Kine, our PH had the and thankfully he has this experience. He had to completely dismantle the motor, clean it, drain it, dry it, rebuild it all within a day.
Wow.
And he just late at night, we'd finish dinner, he'd go back, work on the motor. Early in the morning, he's working on the motor anytime he had time in between hunts. So that was probably one of the worst because you get a vehicle stuck in mud or things like that, but sinking a boat was a new one for me.
But yeah, but it's just like you said, at least it had a good ending, so that worked out
Yeah,
for you
you
guys.
can. It's those 24 hours sucked, but
Yeah.
after the fact, you can look back on it and laugh. And like when I shot my buffalo, our battery on the vehicle actually died out
Oh,
there in the middle of the bush in the dark, and the ground was bumpy enough we couldn't push start it, and so we ended up having to get in touch with camp and have another vehicle come all the way out there and fetch us. But what that could have been a long night of just sitting there in the dark. But if you make the most of it and have the right attitude, we lit a fire. We took some fresh buffalo meat and cooked it over the fire. We got to sit there under the stars. My buffalo head was sitting there by the fire, just getting to look at it and reflect on the hunt. And I could have stayed out there all night. Like that's the time that being stranded is as good as it gets, And
yeah.
I was, you get back to camp close to midnight or whatever. It's a long night. You've had a long day, but um, I think Steve Ranella talks about like the different categories of fun, and I quote that a lot. Like
Mm,
I'm probably going to misquote it. I always do. But type one fun is the short-term fun, like going on a roller coaster.
yeah.
It's fun in the moment and you get a rush, but you're not going to be really telling that story to people months
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
I think then type two fun is where it kind of sucks in the moment and you're a little bit miserable or it's even sometimes it's a near death experience or whatever, and it's pretty serious and it's not good in the moment. But after the fact, you look back on it fondly. So I'd say most of my bad hunting experiences I look back on fondly, except for probably any time I've wounded an animal and lost it. I mean,
Yeah.
that one you can never really get over that feeling.
Yeah. I mean, that feels like somebody hit you in the gut. It's not a nice feeling to have. I always, I don't sleep. If the times I do wound an animal, that night I don't close my eyes. It's like you keep on thinking what could have gone wrong. But the next day you go out, if you find it, it's the best day of your life again.
Yeah, exactly. It's the ups and downs. But, again, it's about, I guess, attitude. Like even when you do that, all you can do is you can't undo it. You can't take the arrow back or reverse the bullet. So you just have to learn from it and just choose to do what you can and not do it again next time.
So what was your best hunting experience?
I would say my first animals are probably a category of their own. Like my first warthog I talked about, or then my first one with a bow. That was, I mean, I think I had tears in my eyes as soon as that arrow hit its mark because I had some ups and downs, like I mentioned, learning bow hunting
Yeah.
with my dad. We were so green, we just didn't know
Yeah.
a lot of stuff. So I had my first bow hunt. I wounded a warthog, and after all the prep and the excitement as a kid, that disappointment's pretty tough. So when I shot it, I mean, it was all the more exciting. It meant even more because of that failure. But Again, I'd say first animals are a category of their own. Probably, I keep looking over, got my mountain zebra here on my desk, and this is probably I'd say probably my fondest bow hunting memory. Um, for people who don't know, people always even ask like, if hunting a zebra is legal, or isn't that like shooting a horse, right?
Yeah.
You get all the stereotypes and people get upset about it, but man, it's difficult, and especially mountain zebra in Namibia, and especially free range mountain zebra. They're ghosts, and the terrain that they're in. So walk and stalk is super difficult in the mountains, and then hunting them over water, as I was doing. Basically, got invited by a friend to hunt his property, actually just outside of Windhoek. So it was similar to how I hunt deer here, where I actually would just drive from the house, 45 minutes and hunt. But he invited me to hunt mountain zebra because he had figured out this one. It's basically a cattle farm. So just a free range cattle farm, not a high fence or just hunting farm in general, right? But there's
Yeah.
this population of mountain zebras, huge mountain that they lived on, and they would come down to this one water point in the foothills of the mountain in the evenings and drink. So he had actually shot one with a bow, but it took him a really long time. And then he invited me to come. He was a friend from archery. He invited me to come try my hand at it. And it took me a year of going back and forth out there and trying all kinds of different setups to eventually shoot one with a bow because again, a lot of people don't realize that zebras are very spooky animals, especially the mountain zebras. They primarily drink at night. So if you're hunting them over water, it's very difficult to get them to come in during the daylight. And then when they do come in, 9 times out of 10 or more, 99 times out of 100, they'll circle downwind of the water before actually going in. And so when you're bow hunting and you're trying to stay close, they'll usually come around you and smell you. Sometimes they'll walk a full 360,
Yeah.
before going in. And so it took a year of tinkering with setups, hunted in a tree stand, hunted in a brush blind in a different spot. And then finally we figured out a way to position a pop-up blind that was right in front of this ditch that they didn't like to cross. It was a little too steep for them to cross. So how it would happen is, and it was about 40 meters. We got a little bit further from the water versus being, 20, which is ideal, right? With a bow, you want to be as close as possible, but we
Yeah.
backed up to 40, and the zebras would come in and they'd circle down the wind. I mean, walk right in front of the hide and then go into the water. So in their minds, they've checked the wind. Everything seems okay.
Yeah.
And still took a couple more tries on that. But how it worked out was when I finally shot it was the one day my dad was actually able to come and hunt with me. I was going solo all the other times.
Well,
And just kind of how, honestly, like a blessing to be able to share it with him. And
yeah.
that's what makes it special because he was a part of the whole journey and very invested in me getting that mountain zebra. But of course, the first day he comes with me, they come off the mountain in the beautiful sunset, picturesque. First time seeing them in daylight, like I've never, first time actually, it was maybe, I think it was my second time even seeing them in this year of trying to hunt them.
Yeah.
So it was like it's kind of like a moment in a dream where you can't believe this thing's standing in front of you and you've got to kind of compose yourself and be like, this is happening. I need to focus, draw back. One of the most difficult shots I've ever made too, in a really awkward position, uphill out of a pop-up blind, 40 yards. And I had that lighted knock just sail perfectly into his shoulder. And it's one of those shots where you just immediately know it's finished.
Yeah.
And I think my dad and I even just kept saying that too. Like I hugged him or whatever and I said, it's finished, man. Like, and we actually could hear him fall down. I heard where he went down.
Yeah.
And just
That's
kept
the
saying, it's
best.
finished.
Yeah.
It's finished, And still in nice, like in daylight, still got to get out and go see him and just kind of sat there on the ground with my dad for a couple minutes, just in silence, just soaking it in. And they're amazing animals. I always say the mountain zebra is like the thoroughbred racehorse to your
Yeah.
farm horse. I think Burchell zebra are beautiful, not all the other zebra species, but there's something about a mountain zebra, that muscular build and the dewlap and that sharp jaw. They're stunning. And so
Yeah.
people maybe don't get the appeal because they don't have big horns or anything like that. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be one of my most prized animals till the day I die.
Yeah, I shot my first mountain zebra when it was last year when we were hunting in the Free State. And also when I laid my hands on that mountain zebra, to see that dewlap was something new that I haven't seen before. The black stripes that only runs to the bottom of the tummy, not all the way around. And then to see that beautiful palm stripes they have on their butt. Oh, it was amazing to see. And even with their golden mouth, they're totally different than the Burchell zebra. Both of them are still pretty, but I mean the mountain zebra I also saw it's something else.
Yeah, it's a special animal. And for me too in Namibia, doing it free range in like just where mountain zebra live, big mountains like that is awesome because it's one of Namibia's kind of key species that people are known for. Because obviously there's places in South Africa to hunt them, but not a lot, right?
Yeah. So the next one is scariest thing that happened out on a hunt.
I've felt pretty scared a few times deer hunting here in the States, walking into the woods in the dark and something jumps out of a bush next to you and it freaks you out. But I would say until this year, I had only ever been charged by a warthog and an oryx. And for sure the warthog was probably the most scared I've ever been. It was one of my earliest bow hunts. I was 11 years old.
Oh yeah.
And I ended up shooting this warthog boar just a little high into the shoulder blade, got about an inch of penetration. We tracked him for a while, and I somehow got in front of the trackers and my dad. And of course, this is one of the only times we didn't bring a rifle with us. And I somehow got in front of everybody, and I'm looking around and I see him there on his side with blood and the arrow sticking out, and he was halfway backed into a hole, but he just looked dead, So I was so nervous about wounding him and stuff. I just started running. I was like, there he is. And I start running at him, and my dad turns and he's shaking the tracker's hand and said, good job, guys. That was a difficult track.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, it was like one of those cartoon moments where I hit the brakes and I start sliding in the sand because that pig jumps up and just starts gunning for me and just starts coming at me and doing that. And I mean, I'm like, my feet are sliding in the sand and I'm sprinting in the other direction. And that thing gets like on my heels, about to get me.
Wow.
And I screamed like a little girl. I screamed for my dad. I said, Daddy! And he still makes fun of me for it still, but it saved me because when I screamed that loud and that high pitch, just like, when a charging elephant is coming or whatever, you shout it down, it made that pig turn and he ran off or whatever. But I would say that was probably the most scared and probably the closest I've been to dying because an 11-year-old kid against a big
Oh yeah.
warthog boar with those tusks and whatever, and you're hours from the nearest hospital and all that kind of stuff. It could have been pretty bad. And then this year in Mozambique, actually got charged by a buffalo.
Yeah.
Which probably more dangerous in the end, but I was also at the back of the group. I was not going to be the one that was going to get hit. So Kai and our PH thankfully got a shot off at like 5 meters.
Yeah.
Through the grass, just what he could see, hit him in the neck, and it turned him and ran off. And then they ended up having a follow up in the thick reeds. But I'd still say, people might laugh, I'd still say warthog was scarier than the buffalo.
Yeah, but I think people don't realize how sharp those teeth are. And it's the time when you harvest that warthog, you actually can feel how sharp those tusks are. It's scary. So he can run straight at you, take a bite at you, and you cut open, and most of the times will run straight for your legs. So By that time, they'll cut that artery off, and you'll bleed out within a minute or two.
Yeah, we actually know a couple. We know a friend's father was killed by a warthog in Namibia, and then another friend of ours, one of their farm workers, also almost died from a pig. I mean, it's no joke.
Yeah, they nasty creatures, man.
Yeah, they are. And then I got charged my bush pig in Mozambique. I got charged by that too. So
Wow.
I've got I don't know. So far I haven't been hit by anything, so I guess I'm still lucky. But
Yeah.
my track record isn't very good of getting charged.
Yeah, well, luckily you live to tell the tale, man. Yeah, no, it's there's one thing that you guys must always be careful for, is especially following up wounded animals, you know. It's people always think it's these big buffaloes and bigger animals that can kill you, but it's even the smaller ones that are very, very, very dangerous. So, Jackson, you sound like a wise man. Do you mind giving a piece of wisdom for our audience?
I think I don't maybe have a piece of wisdom for hunting itself besides I guess I have a lot of things that maybe I've learned from mistakes or whatever. And I think it's the classic cliches of learning from mistakes. And, I'd say also knowing where your priorities lie with hunting and things like that. But, and I've even found myself that times where I've crossed the line of maybe putting hunting before other things in my life too. And as much as we all are obsessed with it, it's not the end all be all in life. But I would say my only piece of wisdom, I don't know how wise it is, would be, I would say with like public perception of hunting these days is something that we all have to deal with and we all get really fed up with, right? It's frustrating to deal with that. It's frustrating that that's a reality that we have to deal with because we want to just be hunters unapologetically and do our thing and be left on our own, but we don't really live in that kind of world now. So it's the only thing I see. I see some people have like this mindset of, well, like stuff the anti-hunters or whatever, stuff the non-hunters, I'm going to do whatever I want. And, Instagram is blocking my which I have that happen sometimes. I have posts that get suppressed or whatever, but I don't think that means that the response should be going out of our way to having blood and things in pictures that we post on social media, even just in general. Even for my own sake, like I like to edit blood out of pictures of my animals that I hunt because I don't want to remember that animal for the hole it had in its side or the blood coming out of its nose. I want to remember it for what it was, and it's a beautiful animal, an animal that I put a lot of work into getting. So I also in the last few years, my wife is not a hunter. She actually doesn't like hunting. It makes her sad. She's still supportive of me, right? Despite all of that. So all the more so she's a saint supporting me with all of my hunting endeavors and stuff. But none of her family hunts. They also aren't huge fans of hunting. And honestly, a lot of other people in my life are just non-hunters. So I've kind of had a unique upbringing and now even more so being married to a non-hunter, have had my eyes opened to how non-hunters perceive hunting, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's, to summarize, that's my point of wisdom, is still trying to have sympathy for the non-hunter's perspective or the anti-hunter's perspective, because some of them are psychos, right? I posted a picture of my croc the other day and had a bunch of weirdos on Facebook commenting death threats and whatever. But I also understand now too, and I try to understand that if someone hasn't grown up around hunting, it is a foreign concept. It's a weird thing. I can't make anybody who's a non-hunter understand that I absolutely love wildlife with everything in me. And at the same time, I like to hunt. My two favorite things, right? Yeah. And my family and I will go on a 2-week camping trip just to explore and enjoy wild places and to enjoy watching animals and being close to them and just appreciating them without hunting them. But at the same time, then we'll go hunt those same animals on a different trip, the same species, the same things
Yeah.
that we look at fondly. And I understand that's a weird dichotomy for non-hunters to understand. So I try to have sympathy because I don't think we're ever going to win. I say win the battle against anti-hunters, right? This is going to always be a thing that we have to represent. And so beyond just spewing facts about conservation, I think we also need to try and tell our stories, try and highlight the humanity, but also understand their standpoint and where they're coming from.
Yeah, no, it's actually a good point that you said there. My previous podcast, I did also bring this up. It's like Facebook allows me, or social media allows me to post general stuff on our page. As soon as I put a trophy photo on there, I can immediately see that we're being throttled. But we also try to cover all the blood and all that kind of stuff just to give less stuff for people to attack you, And I think it's a big thing that we try to educate the people why we do it. That's one thing. I don't think we need to defend ourselves. But it's a good thing that you mentioned now is that if we try to understand their point of perspective as well, it might not upset us less, but understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. And that's how those conversations go well, right? Because it's not going to go well if we just sit there, and it's kind of like politics and anything else that people argue about, right? If you're just stuck, you dig your heels in and you have your opinion and they have their opinion and you just bicker back and forth, all you're doing is just return fire, right? But you're not actually trying to meet in the middle and create an understanding and stuff. And yeah, I don't mean that in a hippie world peace way. There still are fights to be had for our hunting rights. And if it comes down to it, I will absolutely dig my heels in and stand up for my right to hunt.
Yeah.
But I think one of the ways that we do that is by trying to understand that public perception. And you know what? Sometimes I want to post something cool, right? Or like I may shoot an animal, right, and have this crazy blood trail, right?
Yeah.
Just blood everywhere. And like I want to just send it to my buddies. And it's a weird thing. It's not a bloodlust. It's just it's a fascination we're hunters, it's the process. But I don't necessarily want to highlight that to all the people. And I think that's a sacrifice we should be willing to make, and to just suck it up and have to understand that we do have to deal with the politics of hunting on social media and things like that. And I think there's some people that I can think of in particular that are professionals in the industry and put a lot of videos on YouTube that I think value more their engagement and views and shock value or whatever than they really do. And they talk a lot about conservation. They talk a lot about how much it's helping people and how much they're preserving the wildlife or hunting old animals and things like that. But it kind of falls on barren ground. Those seeds fall on barren ground when you're not the way you're acting is not representing, an appealing form of hunting for the public eye, and sometimes even ethics. I'm a hunter, but I would question ethics and stuff too. And I think ethics come down to not just what you do when other people are looking, but also what you do when people aren't watching. So.
No, that's a great piece of wisdom there from Mr. Jackson Engel. Thanks, man. It's no, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's definitely stuff that we can keep in mind to present ourselves better out on social media, so that the anti-hunters can't, give us a lot of trouble about the stuff that we love to do. So,
for sure. So sorry to get on a soapbox there, but I get passionate about that stuff.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, man. No, it's that's why I thought it was a great idea to start this podcast, and that to get people's voice out there and to share their stories. I think it's a great way to do that, and I'm glad that you're passionate about it, and you must keep doing what you're doing, because I mean, if it wasn't for you that started putting out those YouTube videos back in the days, I wouldn't be talking to you now. So you were inspiration to me back then, to know that I have to feel my passion as well to continue doing what I'm doing.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate that.
No, awesome, Jackson. So where can people find you on social media if they want to find out more about what you do and what you're busy with?
Yeah, on all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, I'm at Jackson _Engel or Engel, Engel. So can find me there. I don't think I post anything remarkable or anything like that, but I like sharing stories, and that's the fun part, right? Despite all of the bad stuff on social media these days and having to deal with the politics and Instagram suppressing posts, like I've been noticing that in the last couple of weeks when I'm mentioning hunting and things, there's obvious suppression in certain things, but in the end, it's a fun platform to be able to share stories and share everything that we love about hunting.
Yeah. No, Jackson, I must say thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your story with us. I'm sure the people will love listening to that podcast, and that if they want to find out more, they'll definitely go check you out on all your social platforms as well.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on here.
Oh, awesome, man. And guys, if you'd like to find out more about Jackson, please go make sure to check out all his details. I'll mention it in the descriptions and post all the links necessary there. Thank you for taking the time and listening to this podcast. Make sure to stay tuned for the next podcast to come. If you enjoyed this episode, please, guys, would you go and subscribe to our podcast channels and also our YouTube. We would highly appreciate your support. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to this podcast.